All right, so thanks everyone for joining us tonight. My name's Elise Cunningham, if you don't already know me, and I'm the community organiser for the Sustainable Cities Collective at Friends of the Earth Melbourne. And we've been running the Better Buses campaign since June last year, and I've been running it since June this year. I'd like to start by acknowledging country. So tonight I'm joining you on the lands of the Wurundjeri Willem clan of the Woiwurrung language group in the Kulin Nation in now so-called Collingwood. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and the emerging young leaders of today, and also to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander folks in the room with us. Sovereignty was never ceded. And I'd like to acknowledge the ongoing violence of settler colonialism that's causing the destruction of our planet and the country that we are all on. And I acknowledge that Indigenous Australians have been caring for country for tens of thousands of years, and that they continue to do so today. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And if people want to pop in the chat just where they're joining from today and a quick intro, please feel free to do so. That would be fantastic. Before we get into things, just a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to ask that everyone, if you want to speak tonight, just use the raise hand function. Try not to talk over others and just keep your mic muted if you're not speaking. And for the speakers of the night, just, if we can try to keep to time. And also for those asking questions, please just try to be quite concise because we've got a very jam-packed agenda to get through. So I just also want to request that everyone in the room is just really respectful tonight. We're really, really grateful to be joined tonight by an MP and also the candidates who have been very busy on the campaign trail. So everyone just please be mindful of being kind, caring and curious. So thank you all for coming tonight. And to all those who joined and participated in our previous 3 forums in person, just wanted to quickly say thank you so much to everyone who made that happen. Tonight we have a panel of 1 MP and 5 or 4 candidates who'll be invited to share their policies with us all during the second half of the meeting. So we'll be joined by Melissa Horne, who's the MP for Williamstown. Thank you very much, Melissa, for being here. And then we also will have Nat Kopas, who's the Animal Justice Party candidate for Western Metropolitan, running alongside Meg Watkins. We've also got Virginia Tachos, who's the independent for St Albans, Bernadette Thomas, who's the Greens candidate for Western Metropolitan, and Liz Walsh, who's the Vic Socialist candidate for Western Metropolitan. I don't think I'm missing anyone from that list. We're also super excited tonight to be hearing some stories from the community that really paint a picture for why buses are so sorely needed in the West. So we'll be joined by Syeda and Juliana, who'll be sharing their stories with us tonight. So thank you so much for both being here and for sharing with us. And we'll also be joined by John Stone, who's a transport planning academic at the Uni of Melbourne, as well as Rosa McKenna, who is from Better West and is going to tell you all about the newly formed Western Transport Alliance and the priorities of that group. And before we kick things off, I'm just going to share a video with you that was a project worked on by Sustainable Cities and Organise Us, and was kindly paid for by the PTUA. So thank you very much to them. It's just a little 2-minute sort of advocacy video. You'll recognise a few of the familiar faces in that one. And I'll just share that with you now.
A better bus network means more freedom, more safety, less stress and better health for everybody.
There are many new development happening in Western area where there are no buses.
Living in Werribee, there's very limited buses near my area, and because there's no buses, I have to go to my local library and wait there for a really long time until 6 o'clock, and so my parents can pick me up from the library.
Still we are suffering this transport system. If it is fixed, then I think we will be happy.
and as I work as a nurse. So my understanding would be for general people would be like just build, do the funding probably and increase the frequency and the number of buses probably, and maybe find out new routes because there are newer areas which needs commuting as well. If we have buses, we are taking off more cars from the roads.
An investment in public transport is an investment in a better economy and a better mobility system for everyone in our state.
We all know the Western community, they are mostly first home buyer, struggling community for work-life balance, and this community deserve better buses first in Victoria.
Government should take some initiative to fix the problem in the west side.
We're calling on the government to actually do something and actually provide a proper, prompt bus service that actually meets the needs of residents and is actually electric powered.
The West deserves the best.
West deserve the best.
The West deserves the best.
The West deserves the best.
Hey, great. So yeah, with that in mind, let's kick off. I would like to invite our first speaker, Syeda Zahra.
Hello, everyone. And first of all, thank you so much for such event like that, so they can know about our problems. So I'm living in Mount Atkinson. There is no public transport come there, and because of that, people who are living there suffering lots of problems. Like if they want to go or go somewhere, they didn't go anywhere like normal areas, like developed areas. So I'm a teacher aide and I worked in Albans. Most of 90 to 95% of time when I asked for DD or Uber, they didn't accept my ride, because it's totally far. I have to wait for long time, and most of the time I ask for my neighbors or some family friend that they will pick it to my home to Rockbank train station, because there is no public transport there and I can't drive. And most of the people which I know driving, but they live in my area and they travel by public transport. And so I know it's not a big deal that if I don't know drive. Even I know a family who lives in our area. Their family have a 18-year-old boy. And like that family, there are a lot of families there who have a less than 18 years old boys. They don't have lessons. So if they want to go to university or the college, how they can go there? Because there is no public transport there. So how can they go because they can't drive, and their parents have to drop everywhere, and their parents suffering these problems because of no public transport. And as you know that Christmas is coming, and children want to go to see the lights like every New Year or fireworks, but there's no public transport. The fireworks start at 12, and how can we reach home if there is no public transport there? We can take a train, but it's stop in Rockbank. How can we come to our home from Rockbank to my house? It's very difficult for us. So everyone, that from 2 to 3 years, because of pandemic, there's no fireworks. So after 2-3 years, the fireworks open for everyone. So my children most of the time question me, Mama, did we go this time or not? So I have a question for everyone who is attending there, that if we are living in that type of area which there are no public transport arrive, so how can we celebrate our Christmas or fireworks or New Year's? Why we are suffering these problems? Because of they are not thinking about us. So they have to think, if they are developing any new area, they have to think about these things, that they will give us some buses. There's a basic need they have to give us to us. And most of my friends who are taking Uber from Rockbank to our area, they are spending $20 or $22 sometimes. They depend on the peak hour or something. So why they are spending the money, $22, $24 for one ride? They have to just tap the card for $3 or $2 and just reach their home. So I don't know why they are not thinking about that. They have to think that when they are developing any new area, that we need a public transport bus. Even anyone want to go to grocery or something like that, they need a bus. Because sometimes I know most people, they know driving, but because of the car, the car is not working sometimes. So we need a bus. We can take our bus. We can go anywhere. But so that's all. Thank you for so much. But at the end of my speech, I have a question that did my question is children asking from me the same, that me and my children go for city to see New Year like this time or not, because my husband is overseas most of the time and I can't drive. So who can take me to the sea to celebrate New Year and Christmas? At the end, I just want to ask this question to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Syeda. And if anyone has an answer for Syeda, we'd love to hear it. Another thing as well that Syeda and I were talking about the other day is that there's very limited sort of community services in her area as well. There's no chemist and minimal sort of shops. So we were talking about how, not having those services as well as not having a bus just makes things, it just doesn't make any sense. So thank you very much, Syeda, for sharing. Does anyone have any questions for Syeda before we move on to our next speaker? And that's all good. If there's no questions, we'll move on to our next speaker. So we would love to hear from you, Juliana Byers. Take it away.
Yep, just checking, can everyone hear me? I have been having audio issues on Zoom. Yeah, all right, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. So I'm Juliana, she, her. Some of you might have seen me in The Age, either in print or online. I had a reporter follow me on my university commute from Melton, Kurrajong, Melton area to Footscray. I make that commute 3 times a week to go to uni, and I also work in Footscray. So if uni happens, I work 2 days a week in Footscray. So if uni happens to be 3 days and then work is another 2 days, I'm making that commute 5 days a week. From door to door, it's a 2-hour commute. The 2 closest bus stops to me are a 20-minute walk from my house. So if it's raining or if it's hot, if it's cold, whatever it is, I have no choice. I have to walk 20 minutes just to get a bus, and that's just to the train station. Now, if I'm lucky and I've got work early in the morning and I can get a lift with someone to the train station because I'm not able to drive, it takes 15 minutes maybe in a bad run to get to the train station, usually more like 10. I have to catch the bus. It takes me 25 to 30 minutes to get to the train station on the bus because it follows a loop, which it doesn't need to follow. There's no need for the one bus to make so many loops. And then I have 4 minutes to get from platform 2, where the buses stop, to run over to platform 1, or I'm going to miss my train, which leaves which leaves every hour, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30. If I miss the 10:30 train, I miss my university class for the day. So if I have to get that 11:30 train, that's the time uni starts. By the time I get to uni, it's now probably like 12:30, and sometimes uni's already over. So I miss a whole class. And even though I am lucky that I'm getting a loan from the government for my studies, university is not cheap. And missing a class is something that I'm going to have to pay for eventually. And I know I am lucky that I can get public transport, that there is some kind of public transport, but it's not reliable. The bus also only goes every hour, both the buses near me. So if I miss one of those, then I have nowhere to go. I live with my family, but my family work and they work in the city, so they need to take their cars. So I have no other way to get to university and complete my studies, no other way to get to work. I work as a kindergarten teacher. And I don't think it's too much to ask for anyone to be able to get on a bus and go get to work, get to university reliably, on time, and not have to spend a whole night before planning, right, what time do I need to leave the house exactly? What time do I need to be at the bus stop in case it's early, in case it's late? What am I going to do if the train's late? So just all these questions shouldn't need to be being asked. I should just be able to go, all right, the bus is leaving at these times. I can catch any one of these buses. There's enough trains for me to get to uni. All's good. I don't think that's too much to ask in Melbourne in 2022. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Juliana, for sharing. And I agree. I don't think that's too much to ask at all. Yeah, so next up, we're going to hear from John Stone, who's going to be sharing a bit about the Better Buses campaign and the Better Buses for Melbourne's West paper that was co-wrote with Ian Laurie, who's also here tonight. So I'll just hand over to you, John.
Thanks, Elise, and thanks, everybody. I'm coming to you from Wurundjeri country. When we're talking about transport, we should always think about how many feet have walked on the paths that we're taking over the millennia. As we've really heard clearly from Syeda and Juliana, public transport is really important for everyone, and everyone deserves a chance to move around their neighbourhood and city without having to use a car. And the problem, though, is that our services, as people have said, and as all of you people who live in the suburbs of Melbourne already know, the infrequent or non-existent services and long travel times, polluting technology. In short, public transport is really falling short of meeting our everyday needs. And that means for the people who can drive, more driving to work, school, and the essentials of city life, and escalating costs. And as we've heard, for all of us at some point in our lives, we're not going to be able to drive. And so therefore we are cut off from the richness of city life, whether that be your friends or social supports or education or health services or work. All of those things are vital and why we all come together in a city. So reliable, clean, green public transport for everyone, where and when they need it, is our goal. And importantly, the work that Ian and I have been doing, bringing together a lot of academic work on public transport services for the suburbs and experience of cities all around the world, what we've found is that it is possible to reformulate the 80 broken bus services that we have running around the West and formulate those into a network that people can use. And this is really just taking us in the direction that the state government, the Department of Transport, Ben Carroll's bus reform plan is setting the targets for. So they've said we want a bus service that works for the 21st century, and the sort of principles that we've put into our work are the same principles that are underpinning that. But what we've done is to prove, using the same software, that modelling software that the Department of Transport uses, we're able to show that the idea of reformulating our bus services into a fast, frequent, direct network of clean electric buses is practical, and it's something which might take a decade or so to bring to full fruition. But what we've made clear in the work we've done, which is a concept which needs a lot more work and needs more discussion between the Department of Transport and the communities that they are serving. But what we've proved is that it is possible to, with a small top up of money, maybe $50, $60 million over the next term of government, to bring the expenditure on buses in the West per head of population up to the Melbourne average to keep pace with population growth. And if you put that money into a network of fast, frequent and direct buses, we can have services running every 10 minutes, 7 days a week until late in the evening. So something which would allow Syeda and her family to see the fireworks, something that would allow Juliana to get reliably to work and university at the time of her choosing. All of those things are possible if we reform the bus network along the lines that the minister's talking about in his reform plan. So what we're looking for really through the work we're doing with Friends of the Earth and with the communities across the West is to say, get on with that plan, give us some concrete targets and budgets and deadlines, timetables for getting a better bus network for the West within the next term of government. So that's what really we're looking for from anyone who gets elected on Saturday. So back to you, Elise. I think that really just sums up where we're up to, and what we're saying is we've got this problem and our work demonstrates that it can be solved.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. And yeah, one of the comments that has been widely heard at all of the forums after you sort of explain that plan and after there's been a bit of discussion is that it just makes sense. It's just logical. It just makes sense to do this. And it's so easy, and it's something that can be done in a lot less time than it takes for these bigger sort of transport infrastructure projects, which is why it's something that, you know, we should be prioritizing, because it would just change the lives of so many people in the West. So what I'll do next, I'll invite Rosa to speak next, and then maybe we'll just have a couple of minutes for any questions. I'm just aware we're running a little bit over time at the moment. So yeah, I'll pass on to Rosa, and then we'll just do a couple of questions for the community speakers. So take it away, Rosa.
Hi, I'm Rosa McKenna. I live in Spotswood, so inner West. We've cooperated, so I belong to a thing called Better West, which is Spotswood, South Kingswell community, and we've been advocating for all sorts of open space and transport issues for a long time. We ran a transport forum in Spotswood in October, and then I realised that Friends of the Earth were running their Better Buses campaign in the outer suburbs, and we asked for their help to get our forum going. And I realised that unless all the people of the West get together, the communities, not the political parties, but the people actually start to put forward their needs for mobility, clean air, clean space, all of these sorts of things, we're not going to get anywhere. So at the Brimbank forum, I suggested that we form an alliance of community groups across the West. And we have now a number of groups who've basically signed on to say, yes, we need community activism to get the resources, the infrastructure that the West needs. But maybe the way the West works, we're such a cooperative, multicultural, diverse community, we can actually be the best in Victoria by creating integrated, systemically connected infrastructure with rail, buses, active transport, and so on. So only by working together, and I think the better buses proposal is the start. So if we can support the better buses in the west, then we take a huge number of cars off the road. We provide connected transport for people who need to get to university, to doctors, to schools, to wherever they need to go. This is a win-win situation. So we've got now a number of community groups, the Greater Sunshine Community Group, Windbus, Better West. The linked group is an NDIS provider, the Canley Group, Bike West, who are an active transport group in the West, and of course the Point Cook group. And I know that there are other groups who want to join with us. So we're hoping that we're starting a movement of residents, participants who just want better transport in the West, better freight mobility for everybody in a sustainable sort of way. So we invite you with Sustainable Cities to join this movement to get what we need to survive in the new world in the West. What can I say? That's my pitch. People power, I think. People power will get what politicians, we need to push the politicians to do what they need to do. So that's my pitch to you. I hope that any community groups who are not yet joined up will start to join up, and we'll start to get a little bit of a momentum towards very good transport, both people mobility and the movement of goods in the West, working in a sustainable way for the future. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosa. That was an excellent pitch. Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for that. I will open now if anyone, we'll just take a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions for any of the speakers who have just gone. We'll just, just raise your hand and we can do that.
Are we in total agreement?
I think everyone's just into it. Everyone's just been too entranced and too motivated, and everyone's just too excited to ask questions. They just want to join the alliance, I think. So
we have got a paper release, and maybe we can publish that to people to see, to show that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can send it around after the meeting. We wrote a paper to send and sort of demonstrate our priorities. And yeah, more than happy to send that around to everyone here. So if you want to join groups or individuals as well, are welcome to join. So Chloe, you've got your hand up there.
I do. Could you put some contact details in the chat, Rosa, or any, I guess, point us towards any further information? I think you might be able to upload files on there too if you wanted to put the paper in the chat.
I'm a bit challenged to putting the paper on the chat, but maybe contact Friends of the Earth, for the contact details, because we're working together. So I'm sure Elise will give you those contact details.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, nice to see you, Chloe.
Yeah, all right, I'll pop my email in the chat, so if there is anyone here who's interested in getting on board with the alliance, you can send me an email and we'll loop you in. And yeah, also shout out to Senthil for the logo that he sent around today. It's awesome. Okay, so now in the interest of time, let's move on to hear from our candidates, and I'd like to first invite Melissa Horne, who is the current Labor MP for Williamstown. If you would like to just take 5 minutes to sort of, share Labor's plans for better buses. And just want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really happy that you're here with us.
Thank you very much, Elise. And can I too start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I am joining you from Bunurong country. Look, thank you also to Syeda and Juliana for sharing your stories, because as you'd be aware, sharing these stories makes the advocacy that we do as local members of Parliament so much more powerful to be able to represent and hear firsthand exactly what it is that people are experiencing. I'm here, though, as the member for Williamstown. I have got some content about buses, but it's by no means my portfolio area. So I will talk to you about in sort of broad brush strokes about what the state Labor government has been doing. And I'm really encouraged, John Stone, that you have been talking to Ben Carroll about your innovative plans and have got that sort of pathway forward of working together. Rosa, of course, I know, and we have spoken about transport things many times, and I think that is a really inspirational plan to talk not only about buses, but that interconnectedness, particularly in the movement of goods and services, which fits into my portfolio of ports and freight. So as you'd be aware, Victoria's bus plan was released in June 2021, and we have spent $500 million on buses since we were elected in 2014. Our bus plan has a look at 6 areas of reform, which is about making, much of which resonates with what you've been talking about this evening. And it is making the network simpler, faster and more reliable. It's introducing a cleaner, smarter fleet, which is, and it's good to see that the hydrogen buses and the electric bus trials are being rolled out in the western suburbs of Melbourne, and also too that every new bus purchase from 2025 will have 0 emissions. We're committed to having better performing buses, better customer experience, better governance and systems management, and delivering better value for money. There's been a number of bus service improvements in Melbourne's west and north, and this includes work that's been done in Sunshine and Altona, where we've added more bus routes, bus services in Sunshine and Altona, and increased frequency of services. We've also added a number of additional services in Manolates, Tarneet, Point Cook and Werribee. And the Department of Transport is planning a new style of bus network that has got those higher frequencies and more connected to give people more choice. And I think this correlates with the work that you have been doing, John, as well. We've been also too, there's another thing too that might be worthwhile just adding into the mix, particularly Rosa and also to Friends of the Earth in your advocacy piece. The Department of Transport has got a flexible local transport solutions grant project. And this is, in effect, works with local government to be able to provide grants for local bus services in the form of community buses. Now, I have seen many of these operate, particularly in regional Victoria, where it provides that vital interconnectedness. And I think that might be something that's worthwhile exploring. But basically, that is where we've got to, and we will, I acknowledge there is much more work to do, and we will continue to do so. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And what we might do, we'll go through each of the candidates now, and then we'll have a bit of time for questions at the end. So if anyone has questions for Melissa, just hang on to them, and we can leave time at the end to ask those questions. So let's move on now to our next candidate. I think we can just go alphabetical order by surname. And I will invite Nat Kopas to share with us the Animal Justice Party's plans.
Hi everyone, my name's Nat Kopas and I'm coming to you from Boonwurrung land at work today. I'm the Animal Justice Party for the candidate for the upper house in West Metro alongside Meg Watkins, who's probably a more familiar face to most of you. So this is the third forum on transport I've attended. And before this, I didn't know much about transport, apart from the fact that the West is a big growth area and that we seem to be very under-resourced and underfunded, and it just doesn't really seem to work. And everything that I've learnt from residents and community groups and experts has just reinforced this belief. So I want to thank Syeda and Juliana for sharing their stories today, because putting that sort of human face on it really just drives home how much impact this has on people's lives. And I've seen that myself, because my mum stopped driving early this year and she's really struggled to maintain her independence without a car. Like, she's managing, but it's definitely not what it used to be. So basically the residents of the West deserve better. And I think at the end of the day, we're all in agreement about this. It's just making it happen. But I don't think anyone's disagreeing with any of the things that we're hearing. So the AJP has a tagline, which is animals, people and planet, and transport affects all of these things. So in practical terms, what does this actually mean? Like, what am I committing to, or what is the Animal Justice Party committing to? So the first thing is we just really want to continue to work on this issue. My volunteer role, other than being a candidate, is the State Advocacy Manager for Victoria. So I really hope that we can, like, whatever happens, obviously we can achieve more if we get a candidate in, but I'd like to continue working with the community groups, with all the experts like John, with local residents, and just continue trying to advocate for better bus networks and better public transport networks across the West. So with the guidance of community and experts, our plan would be, number one is obviously to support the Better Buses plan, the 10-minute buses, the increased frequency, the reliability. That's the number one thing that we really hope to work towards. 100% of electric buses throughout the West by 2025, prioritising active transport and walkability and trail linkages. I think, as we've heard from some of the like the Bike West people, I hope I've got their name right, you know, it's no good just having great, you know, tracks that lead nowhere or linkages that don't happen. You know, every aspect of our transport systems need to be interlinked, and it just needs to work. And we also support the capping of daily fares, especially for V-line services, because we need to address cost of living issues. And of course, we'll always consider the animal safety issues throughout all of this as well. So we'd like to work with local council, local government to in town planning to minimise urban sprawl, and supporting wildlife friendly infrastructure, because this obviously has impacts for both wildlife and of course for people safety. I think overall we've just learnt that there's lots of issues with transport in the West, and there are solutions though, and they all appear very achievable, especially if we just start looking at the bigger picture and not just the next 4-year election term. So I commit to prioritising safe, affordable, reliable, accessible and efficient transport. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Nat. Those all sound like great promises. Thank you. We'll move on now to Virginia Tachos, who's the independent candidate for St. Albans.
Thank you, Elise. Thanks, everyone. I'm running as an independent. I've been a councillor in Brimbank for 6 years now, and the focus of my campaign for this election has been social equity issues, of which public transport has been a very key issue. In the last transport forum that we had, I outlined case studies where I worked with prospective job seekers in the employment services sector in the West, where I found they were severely disadvantaged in not being able to access any public transport to jobs hubs like Derrimut, Laverton, Brooklyn and other jobs hubs, because there was just no public transport available or buses that run that early. So I spent a lot of my time organising taxis, shared car rides or buying bikes to get people to stations. to get to work, albeit none of these options were sustainable, nor were they dignified. Transport and mobility, as we've discussed, is crucial to people's dignity, as well as their ability to integrate in their own community. We've never had so many jobs, and the demand for fulfilling vacancies as we do now. Most people in the West travel out of the West for jobs, yet without a car, this becomes an impossible task. In Canley, there are 2 bus services that can take you to EGMs, pokies, but none that can take you to the main street to connect people to services or shops. The West is excessively car reliant. I look at the cost burden of owning a car and running a car. Myself, my motor blew up during the election, just before the election. And then I was faced with severe panic on how I'm going to actually travel, because there is absolutely no bus services nearby me. I look also at the barrier to education, jobs and TAFE. My son, for example, he got an apprenticeship through a high school program called Head Start, which was just started in several schools, high schools in the West. It was for kids who weren't academic, but could be put into apprenticeships and other traineeships that are linked up with employers, and also undertook trade school. Without myself driving my son to the employer, then to the trade school, then to the TAFE, there was no way my son would have been able to sustain this apprenticeship. There was absolutely no public transport where we lived to take him to his employer at 5 a.m. in the morning. Being a plumbing apprenticeship, you had to get there early. This program has had a 99% retention rate for keeping kids at school and in trades. But if parents are not able to drive their kids, it becomes problematic. The jobs and training opportunities are there, but the conduit is transport and access to it. This is why I've made better buses in the West a key policy in my election campaign, because it's an equity issue and it cuts to the heart of improving mobility across the West and touches every aspect of our lives. A shift needs to be made to the West's underinvestment in public transport. Much more is needed in terms of improving infrastructure, train infrastructure projects benefiting wealthier postcodes, as a recent article said, are not providing the best dividends to our community. Money spent in the West where there are growth corridors, the money will produce much bigger dividends by having fast, frequent and connected grid of electric buses. This is the quickest and cheapest route to sustainable connectivity across the West. The West growth corridor is crying out for improved mobility, and particularly as we are the third most disadvantaged LGA, a better bus network would make the biggest impact, I feel, and biggest bang for buck, and to counter the current broken system where people are grappling with cost of living issues. This is what I'm hearing at the polling booths, is cost of living is a massive issue for people running cars, making car ownership out of reach. This can help close the gap of inequality and access to training and jobs in the West. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Virginia. And before we move on, we're running a little over time. So is everyone okay if we maybe just go like 5 minutes over and continue to 8:05? Cool. I'm seeing resounding nods there. Awesome. So yeah, next I'd like to invite Bernadette Thomas, the Greens candidate for Western Metropolitan.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Elise, for the invitation to, I think this is the 5th forum, that transport forum that I've been to. I thought the 4th one was the last one, but obviously I was wrong. So I'd like to also acknowledge that I'm coming to you on the stolen lands of Wurundjeri Wurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. I'm not going to go over like the Greens' entire plan, because I know I've done that sort of over the last 4 sessions, but I think there's a couple of key concepts or areas that are clearly sort of rising to the top. That's the fact that we need fast, frequent and direct services. We need services that are connected to other services. So there's no point in having a bus service on its own if what we really need is a bus service that also connects to trains, or walking paths that connect to bus services, or bicycle paths that connect to train services. So that interconnectivity, I think, is a really key issue in, I know these forums are focused on buses, I think I said this last time, but we need to look at the public transport system, or the transport network as a whole, and all of these parts need to work together, because unless they do work together, we'll have people like Syeda who still can't get to a bus stop or to a train station because there's no walking path for her to get there because she's not a driver. So we need to make sure that all of those parts are working together. We also need everything to be climate friendly. So that's part of the Greens plan. We want to introduce 3,000 more renewable powered electric buses into the bus network. And we also want an increased focus on active transport. So the people who can ride or can walk are not in their cars. They're freeing up space for people who need to drive their cars, and they can walk or ride to public transport so that they can get sort of around their suburbs that way, or in and out of the suburbs. And the other, I guess, one of the other key points I want to make, I guess, it also is that sometimes we focus a lot on commuters, on the peak hour traffic on public transport. But as we've heard from Syeda, there are the times outside of peak hour, which are really, really important to keeping those community connections going, to keeping our social connections going, to keep our cultural connections going. So the Greens plan also incorporates off-peak times in enhancing or improving the timetables for buses and trains in off-peak times, so that we're not simply focused on people going to work, we're focused on people going to school or the shops or the cinema or all of those other cultural and social connections that they need to keep up. I'll put the Greens transport plan in the chat, but thanks everybody for the opportunity just to give you that brief overview.
Great, thank you very much, Bernadette, and yeah, for sticking it out and coming to all of our forums. We appreciate you being here and sharing your plans with us time and time again. And next up we have Liz Walsh, the Victorian Socialist candidate for Western Metro, who has also dedicated a lot of time to coming to our forum. So we thank you for that, Liz. And yeah, I invite you to share now.
Great. Well, thank you for having me and putting on another forum. It's good to finally have a Labor MP speak at one of these forums, given we did not have any representation for the last four. For me, firstly, I acknowledge that I'm on stolen land, land of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present, clearly stand in solidarity with the ongoing struggle against racism in Australia. For the Victorian Socialists, we think that access to a fast, frequent, efficient public transport system that should be free, is a social right, but it's not just an optional extra. And we think that it's an absolute crime that there are communities in the West that have next to no or zero public transport connections, that the state government sees fit to have communities established, have real estate developers make mega bucks off developing new suburbs, but failed to provide the infrastructure that people need to live a decent life, to live a dignified, decent life. And yeah, we think it is a social right that people need to be able to access, in the very least, buses. The Victorian Socialists very much support all of the campaigning positions of the Better Buses campaign. We think that it's more than possible to have bus service that runs every 10 minutes and that is fast and runs on direct routes. That's minimal investment. But also we think that we should demand so much more than that. It is just the first step, that there's a great need, a great transport poverty in the Western suburbs. We're opposed to the privatisation of our public transport network. We think that it's been a total failure, the privatisation of our buses, trains and trams. We spend something like $7 billion last year, giving public money to private operators. And we still pay a huge amount every month to be able to access what should be public transport. So we're paying twice, in terms of our taxes to these private companies so that they can make profits off running the system, and then again through our tickets. So Victorian Socialists are for a genuinely public transport system, for bringing public transport back into public hands, and for making it free. We're also for abolishing ticket inspectors, authorised officers, as a social role. We think is an antisocial role, and we're for retraining those workers in more useful work. We don't think there should be basically cops harassing mostly young people on our public transport network. We think the other key principle, other than it being a social right, social equity, is also about the climate and about ecological sustainability, and that it's critical that we expand our public transport network so that we can get more cars off the road and to have more sustainable transport options. So that's not just having more public transport. Obviously, we think that there needs to be much more rolling out of electric buses as well. Not only that, but we want to see more freight, for instance, on rail rather than on road as well. And we need to get dirty trucks off our streets as well. The moving around of commodities is clearly important for our society, but not at the expense of the health of people in the West. So it's absolutely appalling that we have something like 60%, I forget the exact stats, but a huge increase in asthma-related hospitalisation, heart disease, hospitalisation for heart disease in the inner West. Their health is being destroyed because, we've allowed private truck companies to continue to have dirty trucks on our roads. We've got to get them off, and we've got to get more of that commodities moving around on rail freight as well. We also think that winning these things requires a fight. We think it's wonderful that there's been a transport alliance set up to continue to campaign for these things, that these things don't just get granted, that clearly, the Labor Party can reel off a whole series of investments in public transport, but it nowhere near meets the needs of the West. And that really the West is very much neglected in terms of the kind of investments that we would need to really allow for all of our communities to be properly connected. So we think, it requires public campaigning, a real fight to actually get the concessions that we need. And that's why we're also campaigning to get elected to Parliament, to use the platform of Parliament to make a real fuss about these issues and to hold Labor to account, so that they stop taking our votes for granted in the West and actually start delivering for working class communities. I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you so much, Liz. Now we've got just under 10 minutes for questions. So I'd just like to kick off first with a question for Melissa that's from sort of sustainable cities, but Syeda has also asked me to ask this same question as well. So my question, Melissa, is that we know that Ben Carroll released the Victoria Bus Plan last year, as you said in your speech, but what we're waiting to hear is any sort of solid funding or timeline commitments. So what we want to know is when Labor is going to fix the broken bus network, and whether or not areas like Melbourne's West are going to be prioritised. And Syeda sort of specifically asked when the buses will start in her area, because we hear a lot from Labor candidates that this is going to happen and there are commitments, but what are the sort of solid timelines and funding commitments that Labor has planned?
Thank you, Elise, and thank you for the question. As you'd appreciate, I'm here as the member for Williamstown and not as the public transport minister. So my ability to answer that, I cannot give you sort of firm timelines or commitments. I'm very encouraged, though, that John is working closely with Ben Carroll, and I would continue to do that. Obviously, continue to keep up the advocacy for better bus connections and networks in the West.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Does anyone else just raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll take a bit of time to go around the room. Graham, yep. Oh, you're on mute there.
Goodness me, that was a rookie error after all this time. My apologies. Thanks, Elise. Thanks, Melissa, for attending. I think I can echo the frustrations of the whole community in regard to the lack of accountability from Labor in not attending for the last 4 transport forums out here. They're really essential. We really face a massive level of disparity, even in regard to other areas of Melbourne, where the average trip, as John reported in his fantastic research findings, 71 minutes. We have a far larger rate of car ownership than other areas of Melbourne. And this has been the case for many years now. It takes 1.5 hours to get by public transport from my area to Tullamarine Airport, which is a major employment precinct. Things like even, for example, having a direct bus route from Sunshine via St Albans through to the airport would actually create a massive social dividend. The inequities are just so profound. It's really not good enough for Labor to actually hide behind all these wonderful talk about plans. We actually need some action, and we need promises to be fulfilled. In my own area, we've waited 19 years now for a bus down the main area of Canley, but you can get a free bus to and from the pokies. That's unconscionable.
Was there a question, Graham?
But the question is, what we want to see things. We actually want to see from Labor representation and announcements and firm plans.
Okay. Agreed. Does anyone else have a question, or did you have sort of like a specific person you wanted to ask that to, Graham? Or
well, I'd just like to know why Labor hasn't bothered to attend the transport forums out here. People are very angry. As Virginia noted, people are angry and frustrated and feeling really betrayed by this Labor government. Where has Labor been in supporting the community?
I'm not entirely sure that's a question. I'm sorry, Elise, I'm assuming this is a question for me. I am attending this forum. I thought it was in good faith. And as I have explained, I am not here to make commitments on behalf of the Public Transport Minister. But I think, as I've just seen John put in the chat, that he has been meeting with Ben Carroll's advisor. So that's terrific.
Thank you, Melissa. Are there any other questions? Maybe, if there's anything sort of specific anyone wants to ask at the moment. We had a question from Laura, but I believe John's just answered that one in the chat. Juliana? Yep.
Victorian Socialists representative. Sorry, excuse me.
Could you start that again, because you were on mute for the first half of the question?
Sorry. I had a question, and I do apologise, I've forgotten your name, for the representative from the Victorian Socialists, about what kind of work you would be retraining the authorised officers to do if they could be removed from the public transport system and put into, as you said, more useful community-focused roles.
I think Liz has had to go. She popped in the chat that she had to leave. So I don't think she's here, Juliana.
That's okay.
What I'll do, I found a question in the chat here from Sent Hill. That's another question for Melissa, which is, what is the plan for providing equitable on-demand transport options for disabled people in the Williamstown electorate?
Oh, look, thank you for the question, but we'll have to take that on notice. I just don't have any details to hand, but I'm happy to come back to you directly.
All right, no worries. Are there any other questions from anyone in the room? Yeah, David?
Thanks. Just want to ask, I guess, all the candidates, rule of thumb, what do you consider to be turn up and go service? Does it mean every 20 minutes, every 10 minutes? Gut feeling, what do you reckon?
Well, as a bus user, a daily bus user, no more than 10 minutes. Yeah.
Same.
With public transport planning, it is actually a turn up and go service. Effectively means you've got that within that 10-minute time frame, and that's that's the sort of parameters that the Department of Transport operates on.
So 10 minutes all around. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So we are at 8:05 now, so if there's no other questions, perhaps this would be a good time to just sort of wrap things up. I just wanted to say thank you again to MP for Williamstown, Melissa Horne, for joining us tonight. We appreciate you being here and for listening to what all the community speakers have to say. Thanks as well to all of the other candidates who came along tonight, and to the other candidates who weren't sort of on the panel but who are in the room. And yeah, get in touch. Anyone who wants to join the Western Transport Alliance or take Syeda's family to the fireworks this Christmas. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. See ya.
Thanks, Elise. Great work.
Thanks so much, everyone.
See you all.
Thanks, Elise. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.